Does it say record?
Yes.
I can.
Yes.
Recording.
Yes.
Go ahead and hit it for record.
It's going.
Okay. What are we recording?
Nothing.
Let's see. Hold on. I'm not doing my very tight interlinear and not interlinear, very tight word spacing. And you can mix and match those letters, bring them large and narrow to fit into your column, but no interlinear space. So we're going to work right up until the next line, and some lines are going to be small, some are going to be taller. You can even throw in a lowercase letter every once in a while just for some interest. You can stack letters if you had some little short letters. And I'm just making up letters now, but you could even stack little spots here. If you come to the end of a column and you haven't quite finished, let's say I've got my next few letters over here, and this was the end of my sentence. Now, what you could do is take your pencil and just sort of shade this area as a break. So I'm just going to use my shader and bring that together just as a break. You can also come back and fill in some counter spaces of letters. In fact, I want you to. You could fill in spaces between words if you want to and use that. I want you to have this be a spotted sort of soft, dark and light kind of column as we go. So look at your sample and see how this worked out. So I came to the end of the sentence here and filled in. I didn't want to start the next word, so I used a block. You can even balance that column by starting on the other side, indent into your column a little bit. So you have this little block shadow. Just this gives it visual interest, visual balance. You can find other places to fill as well, but this is how we're going to work this part of it for today. And see, I'm trying to find, I did stack, here we go. I stacked here, this word says others, and it wasn't going to work, so I stacked the last three over here to fit into the column. And you know, it creates another texture of line, and you can still almost read it. That's the fun part. So I used dots in the middle of the sentence instead of on the bottom baseline. I used it in the middle when the whole quote was ended. So you could keep adding words and quotes and repeating your same one if you want to. Here's another thing that I did where I have the large letters and then all of a sudden small. So that creates, again, some areas of interest, or it just fills up the space nicely and it all works out. Here's another stack of letters, oil, O-I-L. And then using this idea to come to the edge of the column to fill up that column. So if you feel like you would like to do some practice, you know, just so you can get your feet on the ground, do it on a practice paper and pick out your quote. Again, I'm going to say, make sure it's a lengthy quote. And if you finish quickly, you certainly can repeat it again. But yeah, we'll have some even increments of columns. Now here's the thing too that is going to be of interest. If your block is set up here, this is our page block. Maybe you don't want 3 columns. Maybe you want only 2 columns. You can do lengthier columns. And see, I'm just winging it, but you can use your ruler to get those accurate. But maybe 2 columns wider is what you want to see. And then you can start together with that just in 2 columns. If there are only 2 side by side, I maybe would vary that top line just a bit, make one larger and one smaller, just so you have some varied interest. Don't make these lines too dark. You don't want to really see the lines, and you're not going to have a chance to really erase them. So let yourself work with what you can. And I'm gonna use this little block idea to start my page. For this second one, I'm just gonna give myself a hint here of just a little block, and then I'm gonna start my letters over here. I'm gonna encourage you to make sure that you cushion your page when you're writing. So you have papers underneath, and give it more padding so we can let these pencil works get nice press and release. And I'm really a fan of narrow press and release letters. And change the height of your crossbars. Sometimes that adds even more interest. But don't leave too much space in between your words. Keep it nice and tight, because this is really a block of accumulated letters. We don't want it to get too wide open. Keep a note on your pencil if it's starting to get too dull and your letters are getting somewhat different than when you started off. Be sure you have your handy little sharpener with you that you can just touch and get an extra little tip.
Is it a regular HB, or are you using a softer pencil?
I'm using a softer pencil this time. This one's a 3B, but either will do. I'm using dark so that you folks can see. I like the idea of a harder lead because I can get sharper letters, but this is working okay. I'm all right with that. And vary the size. That's going to create the interest as well. We don't want too much of the same. And if you have to repeat your quote, try not to get bored with it, and keep your head in the game, because it can get monotonous to have to repeat over and over again, but we want to fill up the column. So make sure that you kind of give yourself that to begin with. The page itself is quite large, but here again, you don't have to fill up this entire block. You designate the margin space, you designate the column space, and that's going to fit within this page. I hope this is clear and you're able to do a little rough draft for yourself, and you've got the sample. So if you do have any questions, please say so now and we can answer these together. But I think that it's going to work out really nicely. And again, if you stop and think about, okay, this would be a nice place for a little block of texture here. I'm just going to shadow that tiny bit before I move on. So don't forget to add these little guys every once in a while, just for interest's sake, because it's really more, it's just as a visual extra element that is why it's added.
Okay, Barbara, I am confused about the column thing. The left side of your first column, is that on your 2-inch margin, or is it set in from the 2-inch margin? Yeah, that's your 2 inches on your real page.
And then I've given myself another,
Okay,
because this is where I'm going to use my pencil line physically put in there. And I like the idea of having margin within the block. So thank you for asking that. That's good.
Barbara, do you want us to make our writing line really light, or no line to write on?
I would go with a light line. If you get it too heavy, it's going to become part of your piece. So you have to be okay with that. And that's gonna be in there. You can't really come back and erase and try to erase pencil within pencil. You're gonna start dotting it and having trouble with that. If you feel that you don't need those lines, I'm totally fine with that too. We can work without the lines.
Thank you.
And that works too, but sometimes the guide of a line just helps your eye. And I'll show you what might happen if I don't have a line. What happens is that you may start out nice and thoughtful, and then the phone rings and you answer the phone, and okay, then you come back and you start working again, and then you just kind of change the line within the line, and that's going to throw this off a little bit more than you really want it to. So I would suggest very light line, something that you can see that will work for you, because you just never know what might happen. See, my pencil with working with the soft lead is a little bit tricky because it dulls quite easily and quite fast. So I have to keep a little sharpen on it so I can not get too dull too fast, because I don't want it to be fuzzy necessarily. But if you have a lot to write, you know, don't discount the idea of using the larger lines, larger letters. Don't press too hard. And try not to do this too much. If you did it at the same place too much, it's gonna start creating a look all of its own. So I would say be careful when you're stacking those letters. Just do it periodically once in a while, but not every single time you come to the end of your column. Don't emphasize that whole thing by stacking that side. Do some on the left side too. So this is not necessarily what we'll always want to see. Just you can go back and refer to some of these and see if this helps you get the idea of the feeling. I just want you to kind of get a flow going, and mainly it's finding that quote that's going to fit the bill, because sometimes that's the hardest part. And again, if it doesn't work out for you, then you need to repeat it. But I'm going to go ahead and take this to my good paper now, and I'm on my page. So I'm going to go ahead with the idea of 3 columns, I think. I think it will work out having about 1 inch in between, and you choose your length. It doesn't have to come all the way down. And let's give it 2.5. No, 2. I'm going to give my columns 3 inch. Wait, I'm going to do a little more mathematically here and see what I want. If I did 3, I may be in trouble. About 1/2 inch or maybe less. You can bring them close together. Maybe I'll only get 2 columns in there. I will work with that. 2 columns will be just fine. Okay. 3. Yeah, I have too much. 3.5 and 1/2. Okay, so that's what I'm going to work with, is about maybe a little over a 3-inch column for each. Yeah, I'm going to do 2 columns, sort of more or less at a 3 inch with a 1/2 inch in between. The second one a little tiny bit bigger maybe. If I am using this, I have about an 8 3/4 block that I'm working with here. So if I was to put that sort of in the center, I'd have maybe 4.5. And that could be my center. That's good. Yeah, 3 1/4 is what I'm going to go with. So that part is just the figuring out how you want it to look on the page. The rest is a little bit easier in the fact that you're going to draw in those nice light lines and keep that sort of floating gently. You could leave a little more on the bottom as far as the margin if you want to. You don't have to come as far down as you did the top. And then I've got a quote that works about friendship, and I'm going to go ahead and use that. And like I did on my rough draft, I'm just going to put in this line and think about indenting a little bit, maybe not really formula of increments, but I'm going to give it about a ½ inch. Start with this idea of the shade, little shaded block before I get started. And you're welcome to add a little bit of color, you know, with your pastels like you did. If you felt that it needed just a little something, I don't want you to flood it with color because I want this to be more graphite oriented.
So like chalk pastels, Barbara?
Yeah, your pastels would be okay, but just sparingly.
The soft one.
Very lightly. Okay, so not too sprinkled with color. But take your time with it, and it may take a little more time than you expect, but go ahead and, you know, let this be an ongoing project. Don't rush it. We're rushing to show you the sample this morning, but I want you to take your time with it and get it so that you're happy with it and it works on your book page. So I'm going to say, sure, map it out right now, but take your time with it. Don't rush it too much.
Barbara,
Yes.
is it important to do the press release for the look of it?
Not necessarily, but again, it adds a certain quality to your line when you're doing pencil work. If you just did straight lines, it's not as exciting, but yeah, what I don't want you to do is the Akim. I don't want you to do the cursive stuff on this particular. I want it to be more cap oriented, varying the sizes. Good question. Okay. Thank you. You can narrow and widen these letters at any time you want, but kind of keep still that idea of press release. I think that's going to work out much better for this. I'm really pleased with the quality of this charcoal paper. It's held up pretty nicely, and it almost gives you line guide with its sort of laid pattern in the paper fibers. So you can sort of follow what's on there. So I'm going to do a narrow little N. And squeeze in my last word here. You could do one line at a time and decide, you know, you don't have to lay it out line wise. You could do think, okay, well, I did this one this size. I'm gonna go now and do one that's this size. Maybe even come out a little bit larger at the end over here. So that can give it a little variance. I'm gonna actually do a lowercase h. You could use the Akim if you wanted to put that lettering in here. That would be fine. If you were having a good time with that, with the A's coming off at an angle, that's fine. You can choose that. You can curve those E's. Just keep a check on your pencil. Don't let it get too dull. When you start to see it started giving you a fuzzy line, sharpen. Make sure you come back and sharpen. And don't press too hard. You want to give it enough so that you see a little variation in the line itself, and you see some darks and lights, but you don't want to press too hard because then you pop your lead and you can't use it. And I'm gonna also suggest that you turn the pen or the pencil in your hand. And almost every time you make a letter, you turn your pencil, rotate it so that you end up getting a sharper line when you need it. And pretty soon it almost comes automatic when you do that. So I'm rotating every single time I'm making a line.
Important message for me.
Okay. So here I am at the end of this column. Here's a good spot for a little shadow break. I'm not going to try to squeeze my next letter in here. I'm going to put my little shadow block and then continue on. I'll go maybe back to the large. Larger lines or larger letters. You can break spots like this. You don't have to bring them traditionally all the way down to that baseline. And I'm always aware of why I spaced that one bigger, because I do want to bring in a spot here. I'm aware visually of the spacing that I have and I'm creating. So I want to go ahead and put my little shadow right in here. And I'm looking, because I've done left and right. Now I want something more in the middle. Excuse me. If you get too thick with your shadow and you're not happy with that, you can always erase parts of it. You can bring out a little bit of it and then come back and sort of lightly redo, just so it doesn't get overbearing in one spot. So don't think that you're locked in there. Ran into a problem. Okay, so now I'm going to have to break the word. Now I'm going to go small, really small on this one. Try to avoid, if you have a straight line coming next to a letter that's above it, try to avoid bringing that directly underneath it. Even if it breaks the spacing a bit, I would prefer to see you not drag it right off that straight line. Where I normally would have come right on top of that for spacing, I'm going to go ahead and avoid it for this because I just don't like seeing it straight down. It brings rivers into your piece. And you want to try to avoid that as much as possible. If you have to scoot over further than you feel like it necessary, you could make a shadow spot right there and let that be your, just a little break. I think I'm gonna see if I can stretch that in out, make that fit the column more. So I'm gonna leave that alone for a minute. Not worried about it yet. When you vary these letters in size, such as narrow O's, wider O's, that is, again, creating the interest and makes it more visually exciting to read. So try to keep that in your mind as you go. I'm stopping while I'm working, sometimes talking and thinking and writing all kind of get bundled. So you want to think about it. Okay, so my next word is without. This is a good place to do another little shadow bar because I don't want to break that word. So you see how I'm working this out is line per line. If you have a thought on a rough draft already put together, you don't have to do it line by line. It's just, I'm just wanting to show you that, yes, it can be done that way. Doesn't have to be. If I try to erase this, I'm thinking that's going to be a little tricky. It's kind of, oh, not bad. Okay. Good. I would put a paper shield when you're wanting to erase. You can do paper or you can do, some of you have a little metal shield. Oh, speaking of metal shields, I wanted to share this with you. I found this. It's a ruler. It's got the ruler and the centimeters and stenciled cutouts, and it's really thin. So if I wanted to use this as a shield, I could do this too. But I found this, guess where? Michael's. Unbelievable. And it's like $2.99. It was so neat. What a good find. And it's a little 6-inch ruler. So that worked out good. Here's my
What section in Michael's, Barbara?
What section? Well, let's see. I was on my way to finding calligraphy nibs. I had to get a speedball nib, and it was back there by those art supply area. But if you had a section of calligraphy, sometimes they only have felt tip stuff as their calligraphy, but that's where it was, back there. Yeah, I thought this is a great, you could even use this as embossing. The stencil windows for those little circles and squares and hearts, embossing, it was pretty neat. So I thought I better just repair this while I'm thinking about it right now. There, that worked. Okay, so again, if you would rather work it so that you have a flow already in place, you're welcome to do that. If you like the idea of just doing line per line, if it keeps a better check on where you are going with your quote. This is my quote I'm going to be working on. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. I'm calling that a lengthy quote versus something that we usually do, you know, with a 2-line quote or something. But this is using inch spacing on the 8.5 by paper. So 8.5 by 11 size is giving me this is where I broke that, but I could stretch that out and use this, but I will be repeating. You want that, Chris? You want that, or do you want that? You want that one? Okay. Now, if you gave it even more not so straight of line, sometimes, you know, take a little slight liberty. I'm not going to say to do this too much, but you could take a little bit of a liberty and give yourself a slight little wave. That could create a wave, a nice flow if you want to do that. What I really don't think you want to do, I don't want you to get too hung up with doing something like that. You know, don't make it too obvious. It's gonna not look as graceful and as good as you want to see. If it's a gentle bend, yeah, okay, not so bad. You know, you could get away with something like that, but this is a little bit harsh. I wouldn't do that. And if you have questions, some more questions for me right now, I'm gonna have you work on this for a few more minutes until say 10:15. And we're gonna take a break and then come back, and then we're gonna do something different other than this. So this is not gonna be your time to do a finished page for this. I want you to start it, yes, and work on it as you can, as the week goes or weekend goes, but try not to think you have to hurry and finish this today. Another thing too, if you do finish these by the end of Monday, please send your page to Kat, because she's done a terrific job and put them all in a nice size folder that works beautifully that we can see. I really think that if you get it to her by Monday, don't wait till Tuesday morning. Tuesday is, it's stretching it because we're going to share on Wednesday this next week. So, you know, that's okay. For Monday, I think Monday is great. If you can, if not, don't worry about it. You get it done when you can. It's going to be a work in progress for you. So this is something that we want to work out for ourselves. So let's not worry about it too much. But does anyone have any other questions? You're all adding good questions here. Whose camera's not on? I see a camera. It's Peggy. Okay. Can you see me, Peggy? I hope. I know you're muted, but I'm hoping that you can see me.
Yes, I can see you. For some reason, my camera isn't working.
That's okay. As long as you can see the screen, that's good.
I can.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so we will continue. Now, once in a while, you have letters that are going to maybe have to go outside the block a bit. And if it does, it creates a nice interest. So make it a good one if you want it to come outside. Be okay with that. And maybe do it another place as well, not just in one spot. You could even come up just a little higher and come through the letters that are above. And because there's a nice round O here and a narrow one here, I'm going to maybe make this one in between. See, if I didn't have this next letter be a T, if I started that line right on top of that N, it would not look good. But because I've got the divider with the crossbar, I could even come just a little closer. But this makes the block. That's the difference, to bring that crossbar and not directly on top of that line. I'm good with that. And like I said, go ahead and let some of your E's be rounded. And if you've got two, you want to bring maybe something like that. Not exactly the same each time. And if your letters present a problem from the prior line, then you need to discuss with yourself, how are you going to work that angle or that line? How is it going to pull? From the next group. I'm going to come up into this block and high on my G. There we go. See, if you push too hard, your pencil may want to follow into some of the grooves. So you've got to find that place where you have control and not let it fit into that groove if you're coming across it. I like to work this way because I can see it more visually for myself. See, I see these little blocks I'm not going to put one in every single row, but where I have opportunities, I'm going to go ahead and use them. And I see that that feels good right at that spot. And this space in here is opportunity to bring my diagonal letters through. And you'll get to step back away from it after a bit. You can start looking at some more possible opportunities. Maybe you'd rather see how they maybe closing in counters of circular letters or bowls of D's. Maybe that works better for you. So you can see how that might work. Instead of finding in between spots, you can do counters. But let's go ahead at this point and take a break, and we will, okay. We will see what happens in a little bit. Take a coffee break or bathroom break if you need to get a little done. You're still working, that's good. I spoke to Linda. Jan, I hope she contacted you.
I just let her in.
Excellent. Yay, Linda. Good, good, good. Okay. So we are now on the second portion for our class today. And like I said, this is going to be homework for you to do for one page. And now we're going to switch gears and we're going to work a little bit differently. So let's think about changing now. And what I'd like you to do is to get a page. Again, a practice page first, because we'll need to work on this as practice. And I think I sent you these little blocks, did I not? Did I send you these?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So what I'd like you to do is put that underneath a paper that you can see through. And I'm configuring this horizontally. That's what I should do. So let this be a practice. And we're going to use a number 2 pencil. Is going to be perfect. You don't need anything beyond that. But I'm going to have us do some little practice strokes first. And by having the blocks, it just gives you a little more control. If you wanted to even put a piece of tape here, we're going to do gestures. And if you felt more comfortable just by having a little tape to use as a base, you're welcome to do that. You don't need it necessarily, but sometimes people feel more secure with it, so that's fine. But what we're going to do these different kinds of little strokes. And what I'm going to have us do is hold the pencil sideways, not typically pencil hold like this, but let it lay down more horizontal in your hand. And I just want you to go from base to an upstroke and quick. And try them at different lengths. If you're holding it horizontally, you'll get a wider length of movement. You can go quickly, you can go slowly. Let go of your pressure as you move up to the top. So all I'm doing is just pushing. You can see that there's like a majority of the weight is on the left-hand side. Looks like little grass blades, if you want to think of it that way. How about that? So that's our upstroke. And then I want you to do, again, in the next block, a similar thing, only this time as you release, we're going to hook to the right. So we're going to pull upward and hook like that. Little push and hook as you release. So it's kind of a quick motion, and it's giving you a hook as you come off the edge. And sometimes you'll get a little hook, sometimes bigger. See if you can find a spot that's in between that you feel like you have control of it. And then on the third block, we're going to do one that's taking off from that. And it's going to go one step further. So we're going to take the base and come up and hook, but this time we're going to come back to the left. So now it's going to be that. It's up and push to the left. So it's just closing in that circle. Now I'm actually not pushing too hard as I go up so that I can release. I can have a nice oval hook as I'm coming back around, and a nice little exit stroke here. I'm not putting too much weight on this upstroke, even though it's heavier, but that's because it's laying down on the side and it's doing this. I'm not going to get as great a look if I try to do it slowly, but I'm releasing the pressure and I'm coming around and exit. So it's that little motion that we're going to do. Then on the opposite end of the scale now, I want you to do the same thing only upside down. So if I took my tape again and put it at the top of the boxes on this second row, we're going to be doing the same thing. Sometimes people have a better feel for coming down than they did going up. So this is the same thing now, just press and let come down. So I'm hooking, but to the left. Hooking that way. And we're going to continue and do this same look upside down. So we're going to come through and bring it through. It's almost like a J. Okay. And the last one of this group, I'm going to have you do additional marks. So it's our J, pull and stop. Then take your pencil into pencil writing mode and do a light line across and then a little hook like that. So we have a combination of a heavier and a light gestural mark here. And these are just some quick ideas to get you started. I have an easier time coming down. I think that works out better. And I want you to combine these two again. Maybe this time take that line up. See how it all works for you. Do an upstroke and a cross light stroke. and a downstroke, just like we did, and see about a light stroke through it, or even diagonally through it. So you have multiple gestural feelings here. What we're not doing is this. We're not deliberately creating these wavy lines like that. No, no, no. Okay, it's long pulls and then soft little exits like that. It's not deliberate like that. We don't want that. So long pulls that's going to be our friend. Now, if you would take another practice sheet, still with the same idea of the boxes. And I'm going to have us use our shaders and erasers and our tape. So just a little piece of tape would be just fine. But for the start, for this first one, we're going to do a tape that is going to be, we're going to use the box. So if you want to work on that box or you want to use that as your reference, I'm going to have you just make little reference to the four corners of the box, and then we can work within this idea. If you wanted to actually pencil that line in, that would work too. So you can do that later. And I'm going to suggest that you do, just for your own sake, to keep this in a nice little possibility of practices. I'm going to say, go ahead and box it in. I'm going to take my tape line actually up into that boxed area, that first box. So I'm coming up, and I'm not setting any formula of where to put it, just inside of that box. And I am going to actually just rub a little bit of graphite first off of the tape. I just want a bit, and I'm going to use my shader to get even more. But I'm also going to rub it with my fingers. So I want it soft. I want a nice soft sort of blended area, kind of a mound. Okay, just a little mound. And then I'm going to do these gestural strokes similar to what we just practiced. I'm going to do one that's going to come, but that's a little heavy. I want one that's going to hook either right or left, and maybe taller, and something that you can see deeper than the softened background. This is just our background now. And we're going to do a few pulls to the left. Doesn't have to be heavy. You don't have to dig into the paper. And then some that are going to be shorter and more not at the same length. This is a little too much the same length. But I want to do some almost like blades of grass. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come back and find little bits to highlight. So I'm going to make this a little bit darker in the turn. And maybe I want one that's darker from the beginning. So I'm going to highlight just a little bit. My art instructor a long time ago used to say, these are called bee stings. So you're just giving that just a little more pressure, more highlight. You don't need necessarily to do all of them, but some of them, you just want to emphasize a little more change of weight. And then I love adding little dots at the end of these points. Just some little tiny dots, or even on the line sometimes. So when you look at this, when you're finished, what we can do is take our ruler now and come back on that line we created with the tape. And then you've got a nice little piece to add. If you wanted to write someone's name underneath it, you can do a double line. You want to emphasize a word in here, you can emphasize something, but it creates this nice little soft decoration. I'm going to do another one in the next block that's very similar to that. And again, I'm going to have you go ahead and mark that off so you have reference for yourself. And we're going to take the tape, though. Now it's going to be a little bit different. I'm going to take the tape inside, and we're going to do something like this, top and bottom. So you create the width by using your tape. You're going to make a box within a box. So I'm using tiny little pieces of my tape. I'm not needing to use too much. I'm going to actually take that one in half. And I'm creating this little rectangle. And what I want to do now, I want to take my sharp pencil line and I want you to do some squiggles in the block. So these are going to be lines that are started like this. What I want you to really pay attention to is how many areas cross over other areas. So when we look at certain spots, we can come back and fill in some interesting shapes. I'm going to just darken that in with my pencil, solid. I don't want to necessarily do the big shapes so much, maybe one big one, highlight one, but the small ones bring more attention. And sometimes you end up with lines like this that aren't complete, so you can actually create one more line if you feel like you want to add something right here. So you can fill in and create areas that didn't get crossed. And you can stop lines, you can create little spots. The danger is that we will overdo. So try to slow yourself down and not fill up the entire block. You could think about leaving some odd numbers of colored in areas, not necessarily every single place. It's going to be hard to stop. That's all I can say. But I do want you to stop at some point and now take your shader and define your corners with the gray. And actually you're defining the whole box itself with the light. You're pulling in some light gray off the edge of the tape. And you can decide how much do you want to leave a little white space in the middle, or do you want it to kind of fill in the whole thing? It's up to you. You have this as your dark area. So it doesn't need extra, and you don't think it has a lot on there right now, but when you take that tape off, it does have a softness, rectangle, soft area here. How would I use this with my lettering? I would use this as a little element of design, either writing above or below or both. You could even break the box and write through it. You could erase an area and write through it. I want that to be one, this to be one, and then we're going to do another one that's similar to this, only down. So I'm going to come up higher on the box. I'm going to create a line first, maybe a double line. And again, go ahead and box that in just for your own reference. I'm giving you these as a reference page so you can add design to your larger work. And this is just a reference chart. So you can do all kinds of fun things and look back at this and say, oh, I think I'll use that or that or that. And you can take notes underneath. I hope you are doing that. So now I'm going to take my tape to that second line, just like I did this first one, and I'm going to just kind of give it some graphite to start, and then I'll pull that down. Usually having the tape just helps define a nice straight line. Now, I really like taking my finger to it because it softens it even more. This softens it to the point where it pulls away good, but it doesn't give it a nice sort of halo of effect here. I want it to be just softer as I go out. And yes, you can have a paper towel handy and wipe it off your fingers. But just like we did here, I'm going to pull down now, come down with the hooks, different lengths, and maybe even some kind of going in opposite directions. Try to avoid that so you have 2, 3, 4 exactly the same size. If you can think about doing it slowly and just do some small and large in the different directions, it's going to be a lot better looking than just the same hanging at the same length. So let's take that back up. And then we'll do the same thing. We'll just dot some areas. Sometimes even double up. and tiny bits of weight. Nice sharp pencil. And finding those areas to just add that little bit of weight to the line. It makes it just elegant to see. Tiny bit, usually coming off that curve or that turn. And think of it as a letter form almost, where you're coming down, you're adding just a little bit of weight sometimes in those turns. And to start. So you have that happening. A little more weight after you make that turn. You've got the weight coming up. You have to be light. Don't get it too heavy. But when you take the tape off, then it becomes an interesting mark. And again, writing a name or a word up here just helps it look interesting. You may find that, oh, I think I want to make a line that comes outside the box. You know, that's totally okay. Think about that. Okay, now another. Are we okay? Am I going too fast? We okay? Thumbs up, yes, good.
You're good.
Thank you. The second, the fourth one here, I'm going to just again sort of redefine that square just for my own sake. When I pull this off, it's going to be a reference. But I'm taking the tape now horizontally and I'm giving a second bit. So I'm going to take my second tape and I'm going to leave, let's leave a 1/2 inch in between. So we want two straight sides of the tape with a 1/2 inch space in the middle. And I would like for you to, again, sort of define the edge with your pencil first. Just soft. We're going to use our shader, our paper stump. To kind of more define that a little bit better. Even the edges, and you can give it a little more softness in between. And now, what I'd like you to do is take your pencil, you can even turn your paper slightly, which find your comfort. We're going to do some zigzag strokes, just back and forth, and then we're going to take the tape off and do some extra pulls. But this first, we're going to just do light. And I want some gaps in here, so don't make them all so perfect that they don't, that they line up too much like soldiers. Go ahead and have some that lean, some that straight. And take your tape off. And now I want you to find some that you can extend like we did with this area up here. So we could find this line might be one to extend, and I'll just kind of go through the motion and pull lightly up. I want one that's coming down, maybe a lengthier pull. You could even add another of your own through it, directly through. But it's kind of fun to see where you could pull those strokes off the edge of one of the lines that are already there. And again, I'd come back and give it just a little more weight at the tips. Not every single one necessarily. And if you like those ideas of the dots, you could come back and, you know, fill in some spots with that idea. I don't know if I do this every single time, but I do enjoy putting them in here. It just adds an extra little flavor to the line. So that's a possibility. Then on our next box, I'm going to have you do a box within a box, kind of like this one. So you could define a little bit wider area. Maybe make this one more square instead of rectangle. And we're going to be using the graphite with the shader even more. So this, I think I did a teeny bit of a demo with this one. So what I'm doing now is on a separate sheet of paper, I'm just kind of adding some extra graphite, or you could even take the edge of that outside paper and run that along your box. So when you're ready to use that shader, you can pull directly from that. And really we want to just fill up and soften the whole inside of the box this time. And I want to use it darker, so I'm going to go ahead and use my graphite stick that we did. And I'm going to create some dark areas because that little charcoal, it's kind of charcoal-like. And it really helps fit this a bit better. So I'm going to get out my graphite stick again and do that similar treatment that we did before. This time not wetting the paper at all, but I'm taking a tissue and gently rub that in, but you'll get a darker amount of graphite if you use this instead of just your pencil, which I really want a little bit darker. I go lightly at first and then I rub it in a little more solid. And I'm pretty sure I showed you that trick with taking your eraser and cutting a straight edge on it. So you have a nice straight. I want a straight little edge to work with so that I can take this and make some lines through it now. You can get a rounded, softer edge. You can get a thicker edge if you don't get it razor sharp. But turn your page around and try to get on that really nice razor edge. Get these really cool looking lines. And then peel that paper off.
Barbara,
Yes?
if people go to Daiso, they have, I think it's $1.50. It's a little makeup brush and it brushes erasure marks beautifully off your paper.
I love it. That's so great. Right in the makeup area. I love it. I'm going today. That's so fun. Good. Okay, so our next one is going to be the torn edge of a paper. And I'm just, again, just defining these boxes so that you have them as a reference. But I'd like you to take a piece of the scrap paper and tear an edge. It doesn't have to be a whole edge, but it works if you find the grain of the paper. If you can tear along the grain, sometimes the paper folds just gently. Sometimes you can't tell, so you can see when it starts to tear if it's too hard to tear. But I want you just to tear an edge. Little strip and kind of go wiggle it back and forth, right and left. That's plenty. And we will take our graphite and either horizontally or vertically, whichever you would prefer. But we did this once upon a time with pastels. We're going to do the same thing with graphite. I'm going to use a little bit softer pencil. You don't have to, but I want you to see it. And I'm going to go to the edge of the box. And I'm rubbing it on the mask. And then I'm going to take my finger or a tissue and rub it into the paper. At first, you're probably going to say, oh, it's not doing anything, but it really is. So don't discount it right away, because you move that away and look, you've got this really cool, soft line. If you feel like you need to get it on there again, go ahead, do it again. And then I want you to shift the paper either left or right, finding interesting spots. Bring it down and shift. So we're just redoing that same thing. We're leaving a little bead of white, but we've shifted the design. And you can now leave more white space just so you have even more interest. Kind of hard to see on the screen, but it is creating some cloud-like effects here. Now, if you find yourself, okay, that's just back and forth, you could even turn the whole page over and get a whole new look and do it again, same way. So you have a different kind of lineup of soft. And to me, this feels like cloudy morning or even an ocean. If you wanted to write something about clouds or sky or that kind of thing, this works really nicely. Then we're going to try some florals and then end up with a couple of borders here. So after that, we're going to do this again. And I'm going to have us think about just sort of either going low left corner or right corner. Or you can do top, you know, the upper left or upper right. So you could do opposites, or you could just find one corner. I'm going to just do something in one corner. And what I would like to offer here, instead of the spiral roses, which would work just fine, we could do that. Or you could just start off with just little commas, and I'm just adding curves larger as we come around. I'm adding petals that come into the one before, a little bit larger. So it's nothing more than that. If the spiral idea works better for you, then by all means, that's perfectly fine. But we're going to do a large and a medium and a small. And I'm going to take my medium, or no, I'm going to do my small one up here. Same kind of way, same exact pattern, just a smaller amount. I don't want it to get too large because when they're all the same size, it doesn't look as good. And then one more over on this bottom area. And I like it if you can stick with the program of leaving large, medium, and small. I think that is just such a good habit to get into. And do they look like perfectly formed roses? Absolutely not. We don't need them to. They're just indicators. I'm going to do some little teardrop diamond, or not diamond, just little teardrop leaf shapes here and there, some larger, some smaller. Just pull out of some areas where it would look like it should fit. And then we're going to take the pencil and run a little wavy, just a teeny little broken border. Top, like that. With maybe a dot or two along the way. Then taking your shade, your little tortillon, and we'll come back and find little areas of the rose to shade, roses, little areas to gray them up a bit. And again, this could be picture a larger page, and it could be a defined element on your page. You could, again, like I said, do maybe a tiny one opposite corner or here. If you want to redefine that little look. Then to finish this one off, I would like to have us think about
Barbara,
borders.
can you move the paper up a bit, please?
Yeah, I'm down to the bottom
There you
of
go.
the page. So all I'm doing here, I'm going to think about doing just some fun lines and think of them as borders for your words, or if we wanted to write a celebration or happy birthday or something, this might be a fun one to think about. And all I'm going to do now is take a couple of lines, little bent, curved lines crossing over each other, maybe 3, top and bottom. Something on that nature. And then we're going to just come by and think of little spots where we can add geometric shapes, rectangles, squares, spirals even. But the key is that we are giving them different sizes and different weights. So we're going to color in some and not on others. You can even add the dots, little circular dots that are a little bit bigger, some are a little bit smaller. Spirals can fill in. Square spirals, you can start outside and work in, or inside and work out, whichever works best. And again, some little solids. Just something that gives a spark. I think these are always fun. So that's another idea for a top and bottom border. And then our last one will be similar, but a little bit different as far as, now we're going to work on the edge. So this time we're going to think about really doing those gestural movements quickly. And I'm only going to do one side at a time and turn the paper. So I'm going to keep my hand in motion, and I'm going to think about how we did this, how we did these first one's how we did all that together. And I'm going to put it into a smaller scale. But now I'm going to just define an area, and it can be S shapes to start, just to give you a little start horizontally. We can do some gestural moves outside, inside, around, and then move your pen and kind of keep it going. Stop every once in a while so you don't make the same exact pattern time and time again. We humans have notoriously a reputation for doing that repeated pattern. If it feels good, do it again, do it again, do it again. But I want you to stop, turn the page. Even if you start one direction, stop. Now come a different way. Turn your page side or your pen. Think about those loops on top and bottom. S curves backwards and forwards. Lines coming up, lines coming down. Stop. Turn the page again. Come into the box. Don't be afraid to come up into it a little bit. Diagonal lines and hooks, curves. And like I'm always going to repeat about S shapes. They work beautifully if you can think of elongating an S or laying it on its side, doing an S like that. Take a gestural stroke further in, turning that page, maybe even some spirals, and see what that does for you. Stop. Just kind of you're changing up the ball game as you move around. If you've done many strokes this way, then try to get your pen to go this way. Maybe even start at this right side and go towards the left. And then find some areas where you can add some more solid blocks. I'm going to look around. I see some spaces. I just want to add some blocks in here. And I mean, just little squares or rectangles, but filled in little colored blocks. They don't have to be sitting on the line necessarily. You can pull them up into the curvature of the gestures. I wouldn't put them clear inside, but keep them outside. And they can be small, they can be large, mix. But I'm going to say, yes, do put one on each line. So all 4 lines of the box. And then this would be something inside you could write. Oh, wait, that's upside down. Hold on. I'm going to switch that around. Maybe that came in a little too far. So you could play with some words. You can even add our little famous dots even more. on the lines or in spaces where you see more opportunities. So these are just some suggestions to get you started. And think about how you might use at least one, maybe even two on your good paper so that you can make it a bigger page. We've got 9 by 12 to work with. And how could I use some of these ideas to incorporate with our pencil work, with our lettering? You're welcome to use any style that we just did. You can use the caps with Akim. You could use the caps, not caps with Akim, the caps as Killian, or you could use Akim to write out a quote. And then I want you to incorporate the gesture somehow. It could be top and bottom with the quote in the middle. It could be just bottom, just top. Which one appeals to you more? How could you actually apply some of these to work with a page? Now, when we're writing on this, remember this size page does not have to fill up the entire area. You can close in, you can work within a smaller area, and that's going to be your focus here. So I think it's doable. So we have two things to think about this week. We've got the columns for one page and gestures for another. Enough to keep you busy for a bit? Yay. Okay.
Can you put your page back up, Barbara, so I can take a photo? Are you
Sure.
gonna,
Let me zoom out a little bit so you can see all of it.
are you going to send it to us also?
I'm not sure if it will send good. It's very light. This is very, very light. I'll have to doctor it up if I send. But you know, this time we're doing our session right now is recorded, so you can come back and look at this, and that'll be good.
How do we access the recording?
I will send you a link.
Perfect.
And it will probably be on a YouTube link. I'm going to try to put it up. I do have an account. I haven't used it recently, so it's going to take a teeny bit of time, but I will put that up. Okay, and Piper said, what about using any color? Yes, but keep it like we talked about, soft and sparingly, not overkill with color. That'll work. If you wanted your lettering to be in color and this be soft graphite, you know, you can oppose it with that contrast. That would work. Kathy said, is it important to use press and release? Not, again, not necessarily, but it does give your pencil work a little more accent and more excitement. And let's see. Yes, it's recording. We're good.
Will you show what you did in the first part of the class again, please? I didn't see any of that.
Right.
Just this page. I've done this page.
This is what I sent, Linda.
Oh,
If you
okay.
didn't get this, I'll send that to you again.
I
But,
found it, Barbara. It was all in junk mail.
all right. Well,
And
that's where to,
I'll look there from now on, but I never thought to look there today.
that's where to check if you don't see it, because I do have every one of your emails in a list on my numbers Excel page. So I just grab all that chunk together and I send it. So
Okay, well, I found it.
Yeah, this is what we're going to be writing 2, maybe even 3 columns to fit your 12-inch page. remember we have that 2-inch space on the side, and then we're working within this area. It's up to you to create the size of the columns and the size of the letters. And they're not straight letters. So the line can be small and tall, mixed in together. But do a very light pencil line, not a heavy one. Because we want to see more of the letters than the lines. And in places where you find spaces, we're going to just sort of accent some areas. Sometimes you want to start with that block. Sometimes you come to the end of a word and it's not going to all fit. So you just add a little block and make the line start again on the next. Okay. This is what I started with, the 3-column idea. So your columns can be narrow, but you're going to need to repeat your quote. That's why I said get a lengthy quote that you can work with, and hopefully you can get through almost one whole column, maybe column and a half, and then you can repeat it.
Barbara, I had a question regarding the gestures.
Yes?
You want us to do 2 on one page or separate pages, or how?
I think 1 is going to be enough. You could decide what you want to do. Let's say I wanted to do either this or this over a quote. So if I took a longer length to it with my tape and just pulled out a longer area, not just a little short boxed in area, I can get this.
Oh, so you're not doing it in a box, you're just doing it on the page.
Yeah, just I want it on the page.
Okay.
So I would say use your graphite stick because you'll get more coverage, and let that be a little softer area. And you may have to do it a couple times to get that look that you want. You may even have to rub it, hand rub with the fingers, but that gives you this area. And then to create your gestures, maybe think about tall, blades of grass, something that is nature oriented would be a good idea to think of a quote for this one. And if you feel like you do better down, then just turn it upside down. Do it that way. And then find those heavies, places, little spots where you can heavy up the line. Maybe gentle spaces, not too heavy. And if you want to create something else in there, sometimes people go darker and wider down at the base. That's okay. But then when you're ready, take that tape off. And you can come up close to the line, or you can come farther away. Need more length here. You could add a line that comes off further. So I have a little bit of white space in between there, you see? That little white space. And then this is all my quote area. I've got enough for quote, or if I want that on the bottom and have the quote on top, I've got a nice little design, a soft design, okay? So that's your challenge for this week. See what you can do with that. I'm anxious to see what you come up with. If these feel like a garden, a floral garden to you, or a forest, little trees, or, you know, find the quote that would fit the image. See if you can work that. Or start with the quote and then see which one of these would work best for that quote. Sometimes I work back and forth. I find really great quotes and I go, oh, that's going to be a calligraphed quote. And then I find some images that I feel work really nicely. Lots of times I've done this with this style in here and wrote some words on the outside, some more cursive sort of words in pencil, but you could do these little blocks and then pull a line through there. That kind of creates a real interesting look. And then you can always do the trick with double lining. Come out a little further and stop, little stop marks at the ends. Different papers except the charcoal line or the graphite, you know, smudges a little bit better. This is a kind of a sketch paper. It's not the smooth slick paper, but it's not our charcoal paper either. The charcoal paper will have little grooves of white of lines in it. You've probably already seen that up close. You can, I don't think it's going to show on the screen, but you can see these laid lines, and that may or may not be helping the situation any. We'll see what happens to it. I think it'll be good. I think it'll be just fine. So that's it, kids. That's today's lesson, and I will take questions if you have more questions. Otherwise, you got the day to work it out.
I have a question, Barb.
Okay.
I'm
Jill?
wondering if our quote is longer than one page. If it goes longer, what should we do?
For this portion of it, or for the
columns?
For the column, make your columns narrower then and more. So you may find yourself doing 4 columns, but
Okay.
if you can't finish the quote by the end of your column, I would say just stop and don't worry about it. If you feel like you want to get a larger paper and you want to do it with, keep it in your book, but you want to maybe fold the paper and have a pull-out kind of look, you could do that.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
That's a great question, because usually that's not the case. Usually we have too short of a quote.
Okay, thank you.
All right, excellent. Okay, everybody, all done. Thank you.